So now we're going to talk about arrays a little more in depth, a little more concretely, all right? We're going to talk about, a can of balls, right? Cut them up, right? So, or a can of potatoes. We're going to talk about a can of tennis balls. Okay, so typically we used to have int x equals 5 or something like that, right? And what that meant is that there's a bucket in memory or a box in memory labeled x, which we're putting the number 5 into. Okay? And then we could change that number. We could say x equals x plus 1. What that means is we take out the value and we say, okay, that's 5 right now, plus 1 is 6, and so we're going to put back 6 into the bucket. Okay? Pretty straightforward. Well, now what if we just make a slight change here and we say, hey, we don't want x to refer to one bucket. We want x to refer to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 buckets at the same time. Okay? So we can do something like that. And that says x now refers to 7 boxes in memory. Okay? Well, obviously, the first question is, well, which box are you referring to, right? There's 7 boxes in here. Did the color just change? That's so funny. God, this computer is like dying. It does not like me. It is so angry at me. All right, so which box are we referring to? Well, we still have to have labels for these boxes. But what's interesting about arrays is that we label them with numbers. Okay, so this is box 0. We start at 0. I know. It'll be all right. This is box 1. This is box 2. This is box 3. This is box 4. This is box 5. And this is box 6. Okay. And box 2 is washed out like it is in real life. Okay. So now you can see all the boxes. All right. And so now each one of these boxes is just like a regular integer variable. You can do the same thing you can do with an integer variable to each one of these boxes, okay? We can put numbers into the box. Don't confuse people. You can put numbers into the box. Okay? We can read numbers out of the box. And in the console, it'll say 53, okay? This is the console. Right. Okay. We can set values, so I could say, x1 equals x0 plus 1. Okay? So we can do all sorts of things to things in the box. Oh, this, by the way, will say, x of 0 right now is 53, right? And so plus 1 is 54, okay? All right, we can just treat it as an integer, but it's like 7 integers now. That's cool, okay? And the other thing that's cool is arrays. Let's do something else. You can also so one thing that's super important about arrays is, so this is of length 7, and so the final index is always length minus 1, and that seems to throw students off. So just draw it out. If you can't draw, and even if it's the number 100, right? Just be like, okay, I'm gonna start here, and it's the bucket 0 and the bucket 1, and I'm going all the way, and I go to 1 minus length, which is 99. Okay, you'll never make a mistake if you just draw it out, and then you'll be like, okay, that's the final bucket we're going to. Okay, don't memorize patterns. Draw it out. Just be like, okay, that's the final bucket. That's the first bucket. I'm good. Okay. Or when you see a number like this, you can immediately go, my buckets are from 0 to 99. Okay. That's 100 values. All right. And if you need to check that, be like, let's say my buckets went from 0 to 2. So I got bucket 0, bucket 1, bucket 2. Okay. So my length is 3. and my highest bucket value is 2. My highest index is 2. So I'm calling them bucket values, but if you start calling them bucket values like me, people will look at you funny. So call them index values, okay? Oh, it changes the color, and so when I turn, it like, that probably has to do with my skin color. Okay, so it automatically adjusts the color. Oh, that's funny. Maybe. I mean, we need too much into it. All right. Okay. So I said before, I made a big deal saying we can treat an array as like so 7 integer values like they're 1 integer value. Well, how do we do that? Okay, so let's say, well, first of all, we can't use any of these without putting numbers in them first. So it's illegal for us when we first create an array. If I say int x 7, it gives us 7 boxes in memory, but all of them have giant question marks in them, as in we don't know what they are, okay? And so we can't use them, and actually Java will smartly get angry at us for using stuff that's an uninitialized value, okay? So we have to initialize them. We can initialize them. Let's say we want to initialize them all to the number 15. Why not, right? So that's easy. We can do this. Okay. And then x sub 1 equals 15. And then x sub 2 equals 15. And x sub 3 equals 15. I'm obviously doing this for a reason, right? If you're not bored yet, you're checking Facebook, you're checking out more Mitch Hedberg clips. This is, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all these 7 buckets now have 15 in them, right? But obviously that was the worst 2 minutes of all of our lives as I wrote that all out. This is, by the way, a close second. Me writing all these 15s in here. 15. All right. Thank God. Whew. All right. Obviously, this is silly. We're not doing this, right? If we're doing this, we're quitting computer science and we're moving on with our lives because this is obnoxious. Especially what happens when we have an array of 100 things, right? How do we set all these values? All right. Well, what's nice is that we have a thing called a loop. And remember the loop, right? It runs the same code over and over again, all right? It's not exactly the same code, but it runs a certain amount of times, okay? And the first loop we're going to learn about is a for loop, all right? And what does a for loop do? Well, the for loop has a place it starts, a place it ends, and how it proceeds. Okay? And I write it like this because I think that's the easiest. So the 3 questions you ask is, where does my for loop start? Where does my for loop end? And how does my for loop proceed? Okay? Let's do an example using this. So what we're going to do is our for loop is going to start at index 0, okay? It's going to end at index 6. 0. God, my 0 looks like a 6. Okay. And it's going to proceed, well, how does it proceed? It goes from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. So it seems like it's proceeding up by 1. So it's going to proceed by going up by 1. Okay? All right. So let's figure this out. So we can say for, and the first thing, and this is going to, each one of these is going to do something to something we call the control variable. And a for loop allows us to define a control variable up here. All right? So I'm going to define a control variable, and I'm not going to name it I, because people think you have to name it I, and you do not have to name it I. Okay, you can name it whatever it is. But I am declaring this variable for the for loop. Okay? So I'm going to make it int box. All right? Box is just the name of a variable. Okay? And this box is scoped to the for loop. All right? So it's only used within this for loop, and it drops out of scope here. All right? So it doesn't have any meaning at that point. So int box, and so we created a control variable, and where does that control variable start? Well, we want it to start at 0, okay? Because that's the name of that box, right? And then we want it to end at 6, okay? Now, you're going to see people do box less than 7, okay? And that's the same thing as box equals 6. So you could, like, you'll see people do box equals length, okay? But I don't want you to remember that, that's the length of the array. What I want you to do is I want you to reason it, okay? So this is equivalent to box less than or equal to 6, okay? Right? Because we go all the way to 6, right? So if it's 0, we keep on going. If it's 1, we keep on going. If it's 2, we keep on going. If it's 3, we keep on going. But we end at 6, okay? But it includes 6, all right? If you put 7 there, it's less than because it doesn't include 7. Okay? Does that make sense? It's strictly less than 7. It's less than or equal to 6 because we're including the box 6, okay? So if you're equal to 6, also continue through the loop, okay? And then we're going to proceed by box equals box plus 1. And you're like, wait, box plus plus, right? Well, that's the same exact thing. Box equals box plus 1. And it's not box equals box plus plus. Don't ever do that, all right? In fact, I just kind of like hate plus plus because everyone uses it wrong, all right? So box equals box plus 1, all right? And then eventually we'll start putting box plus plus in there. But for right now, box equals box plus 1. This is important because you can update box any way you want in there. It doesn't have to add, you don't have to add 1 to box. You could add 2 to box. You could add 5 to box. You could do whatever you want. You could times box by 3. Okay, you could divide box by 2. Box equals box divided by 2, and then you're halving it each time. All right. All of those are legal. You don't have to do this, but we do this a lot. Well, because we have an array and we want to do something to every element of the array, every index of the array. Okay. So now we have this, and we're going to say. Now we want x, the value of the box, equals 15. You get me? So we can say x box, oh my god, it happened again. I did not intend it that time. That is amazing. X box, that's really funny. I was going to call it index, and then I was like, why don't we just call it box, because index sounds too much like I. Oh, we should have made, oh, I got one for you. Don't worry. I'll make this joke worse. Just give me a second. Okay? So x box equals 15. Well, box, what the hell is box? Well, the first time through the loop, it's going to be 0 because that's where we start. And the way this loop proceeds is we go through the loop the first, so actually, this is the way the loop proceeds. We initialize the variable, we check the condition, so we initialize box equal to 0. Is box less than or equal to 6? Yes. And so we go through the loop. So we actually check the condition before we go through the loop the first time, okay? And when we go through the loop, x of 0 is set to 15. So at this point, the first time time through the loop, all of these are question marks, right? But we've set x of 0 to 15. Then we come up here to the update rule, and the update rule says the new value of box is the current value of box plus 1. So 0 plus 1 will be 1. So x box 1. Oh god, ew. And that's when he made a bunch of Xbox jokes, and I dropped computer science. All right, 15, right? And then we come up here, we add 1. All right, box equals 2 now. X of 2 is 15. And then box equals 3, and box equals 4, and box equals 5, right? And so finally, box equals 6, which we'll put 15 in here because less than or equal to, so it's still true, right? And so we're going through here, and it's 15. And now we come up to the condition in box equals 7. This evaluates to false, okay? Because box is no longer less than or equal to 6. Box equals 7. And so this is false. And so now we kick out of the loop. We don't do this anymore. We jump past the loop and we're going on with our program. All right? Now what just happened is, well, we were able to treat 6 things like it was a single variable, right? By going through and doing the same thing to each box. And we were able to take all of this and reduce it into that, okay? That one line. So arrays and loops making our life easier, right? They're making our life easier. All right, so now you might think to yourself, well, we kind of have something like this going on, right? In our ball world, right? So can I erase the, what am I asking? Write in the comments if I could erase this or not, and then I'll go back in time and follow. Can I erase this? What am I doing on time? Okay. So now, all right, let's say we have, well, we don't have to just do integers. Okay. Oh, another thing is if I have, this is one thing, I don't know why I didn't tell you this, but I can tell you this now. All right. So I have x is 7, right? I can say for int box equals 0. Okay. Box is less than x dot length. Okay, so length at this point will be 7 because that's the length of the x array. Okay, so that's nice and legal. We can actually just say length. So that's why you'll see a lot of this. But don't get thrown off by that. This is the same thing as less than or equal to length minus 1. Okay, so if you want to remember that, remember what it means, not this pattern that comes up over and over again, because students will get thrown off if they fall in love with the pattern. Don't fall in love with the pattern. Understand what it actually means, okay? And then we're boxing plus plus. No. Sorry. We're falling in love with the pattern. No, we're not. We're doing box equals box plus 1. Okay? Box equals box plus 1. Box equals box plus 1, okay? All right, cool. Last thing of the week, all right? And so notice, actually, every time through the loop, box equals 0, box is less than x dot length, box equals box plus 1. Okay, now notice that every time through the loop, box is getting closer to the end, all right? So the first time through the loop, box is 0, right? The second time through the loop, box is 1, box is 2. And the end for box is when box is greater than, past 6, right? So it's greater than 6, that's the end for box, right? When box equals the length, that's over, right? And so notice we're getting closer and closer to the number that's going to kick us out of the loop, okay? This is a property of loops. You got to get, every time through the loop, you want to get closer to the number that's going to kick you out of the loop, or else this thing will be an infinite loop. It'll go on forever. And what does an infinite loop look like? Well, let's say we said box equals box minus 1. All right? Well, that would start us at 0. And then we'd go to -1 and -2 and -3, and we're going away from the length, right, which is 7, so we're getting further away. That's gonna be an infinite loop. All right, final thing. I know this video has lasted 9 years, but it's a fun one, okay? And it's important. So let's talk about what this has to do with our can of tennis balls, right? Or potatoes. Cut them up. Okay. Well, we kind of do this, right? We have a ball, so we have ball 1 all the way to ball 6, okay? Or, yeah, ball 1 to ball 6. Is that right? Ball 1 to ball 6. Yeah. So, what if we called this ball 0 to ball 5? It's the same thing, right? It's 6 balls, right? All right. Well, instead of doing that, what if we just said ball can, like can of balls, right? Pretty good. Ball can. I guess it doesn't work if I keep on saying pretty good. All right, so, and that will give us what? Well, remember what we're going to do? We're going to say we start at 0, and we go to 1 minus the length, which is 5, and so that is 6 balls, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you draw it out, you're never going to get confused, okay? Good. And then in setup, we initialize these balls, right? And we initialize them to the same position, some random velocity, and the same width and height, right? So what I want you to do is think of the for loop to do that, okay? How would that happen? And use it, and what I want you to do is use can.length, okay? Because that's important. All right, but think of the for loop. Where do we start? Where do we end? How do we proceed? All right, and for each one of these, we're gonna have, you know, can of something, which is just a ball, equals new ball, right? But it's gonna be within a for loop, so we can do it all at once. And this is all in setup, okay? This will all be in setup, okay? And then in draw, well, we only do one thing to it, right? We update the thing. So then in draw, we're gonna do another for loop, right? Where we go through, and every time through draw, 60 frames a second, we're gonna update 0, and update 1, and update 2, and update 3, and update 4, and update 5. So we'll say for, and then we'll call update on each one of these things. All right. Notice that a can of 0, well, that's just a ball, right? Because each one of these is just a ball. So I could say can of 0 dot update. Nice and legal, because I'm saying update on a ball. Ball has a member function called update, and it'll just go through and say, what are my private variables? All right, I'll just update that. All right, so this is kind of your final project for this week, and it should be pretty straightforward. It's not that bad. It'll probably take you like 2 seconds. But one thing I want you to do at the end then is I want you to change it from 6 balls to 30 balls to 100 balls to 1,000 balls. It's a trivial change once you get this. All right. Hopefully that makes some sense. I'll have some skeleton code for you to fill in below, and I'll see you next week.